How's everybody doing? This is George from Truck Driver Nation. What I want to cover is this is going to be about CSA scores. So, really, what I want you to understand is understanding that the CSA scores in relation to the compliance, the safety, and the accountability. Now, obviously, everybody wants to know what a CSA score is. It literally stands for compliance, safety, and accountability. And it's a safety measurement system used by the FMCSA, that's the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. And the role of it is, I would say, the FMCSA is a primary federal agency in the United States. So, in case you don't know, they're responsible for regulating the trucking and bus industries. So, but the one we're looking at is the trucking industry in itself, because that's what we do. And their overall mission, is obviously to reduce the crashes, the injuries, and the fatalities that's obviously involved in large dealing with large trucks. And this is any truck that requires an MC. Now, I mean, overall, you can say it looks at the whole thing about transportation, but I kind of feel like that's more of the DOT's part, and we'll cover that in length and kind of show you the difference. Now, the purpose of the CSA program, this was actually kicked off in 2010. It's relatively new, and I mean, I remember we didn't have it, but the FMCSA collects data-driven initiative to actually achieve its safety goal. So it's designed to identify the motor carriers, just like the trucking companies and their drivers, who do pose the greatest risk factors out there on the roads. And when they actually identify these risk factors, they prioritize them on like interventions such as warning letters. And they have to actually do with the warning letters. I just already know what that is. So that company has to come up with corrective actions. Also, they do investigations and other enforcement actions to obviously bring everybody into compliance. Now, how it works, the basically it's the safety measurement system. They call it SMS, like just like you would send a text like a SMS. So it'd be safety measurement system. Now, the core of the CSA is the safety measurement system. This collects and analyzes the data from various sources. And some of that you can actually see on the FMCSA website, or called Safer Web too. But they do roadside inspections. That's where they actually collect information on violations found during inspections by the law enforcement officers, which, as we all know, is the DOT. Also, crash reports that collect the data from the crashes involving commercial vehicles. Also, the investigations where they look for the compliance reviews and investigations. So they literally can go into the carrier and collect all the data from that given carrier, because they're under the federal government. So let's not confuse this. Federal government, you heard it right. That's the whole thing. Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. So the behavior analysis and safety improvement categories, as they call basics, they collect data and are organized basically in the 7 key safety categories. If you want to know that, get that deep into it. Now, obviously, these categories, they kind of represent the behaviors that are strongly correlated in the crash risk. And basically, what they include is the unsafe driver. So how unsafe are they? I mean, we're talking about they're looking at their speeding, their reckless driving, their improper lane change, inattention, not wearing seatbelts, looking at handheld devices, um, everything. I mean, because they're going to pull your history. They're going to stomp the guts out of that investigation and find out what was going on when it comes to that driver's driving habits. The next one, they're going to look at the HOS, which is obviously your ELD. So they're going to pull it. They're going to look at violations related to driver fatigue, such as driving outside the legal limits of your operating hours and falsifying your logbooks, whether it goes all the way back to that company that has the ELD service, whatever way it shows, that's what they're going to dig for. Also, the driver fitness. These issues like involve the driver's qualifications, their license, their medical fitness. And I don't really see how they can do medical fitness, because, as everybody knows, there's a lot of very unfit drivers out there. That's the reason you look at about a 12-year shorter lifespan with drivers in general. Also, they look at basically like the clearinghouse, which that would be the controlled substances and alcohols, violations related to the drug and alcohol use by the drivers, vehicle maintenance. This will mainly come back to the carriers for the most part, but defects found, unlike the driver's brakes, their lights, their tires, other mechanical issues, and failure to make required repairs, because they follow those, what's it called? Medical, not medical, but mechanical repair records, because they actually have to have as a certified mechanic to sign off that says that equipment is within the spectrum of being within regulations to be put back in service. And then we're going to talk about HM. That's hazardous material. Make sure about the compliance. So any violations related to the proper handling, packaging, labeling, and placarding of hazardous materials is definitely going to be looked at. That's a no-brainer. And then finally, the crash indicator. That's to measure the overall carrier's involvement in crashes, like overall. And then you, like I said, you can see this on SaferWeb. Considering factors like crash rate or severity, like people being injured, and as well as generally not publicly available. But if you go on the site, it really does say in the SaferWeb, whether they say it's not publicly available. Well, it don't give the details on it, but it does tell you how many crashes they've had. It even says fatalities in there. So the scoring is based on percentiles. So remember that was 7 points was basic, BASIC. And the SMS assigns a percentile rate. Basically, they go from 0 to 100. A lower percentile is better. So like when you're saying, well, what's your score on your CSA? I want to work for a carrier that has a low CSA, because if I don't, every time I start passing those scale houses, I get, overall, what it said is 2% of people get pulled in. Okay. But if you got a CSA that's jacked up, the system is computerized. It flags you. And I've been with companies that had bad CSAs, and man, it's like I swung the door open of every scale house coming all the way across I-40 from California. I think, what was I going? California back to somewhere. But man, every scale house I had to go in. But anyways, like I said, the lower percentile, the better. That's an indicator of how the carrier performs better than a higher percentage of its peers in the safety category. Now, these scores are actually time weighted. That meaning that more recent violations have a higher impact. So as they get older, just like your driver's license, the older it gets, eventually it drops off at 3 years. It's the same thing with them. It takes time, but to improve it, they need to have class 1 through 3 inspections, all those things that help to improve that score by having better inspections. So that's the reason sometimes they actually pay a lot of money to get, especially their brand new trucks, to go through there and get a level 1 inspection. Now, public versus non-public data, when it comes to this basic, looking at this, like the unsafe driving, the hours of service compliance, driver fitness, vehicle maintenance, and controlled substance and alcohol abuse and all that, they are publicly available on that FMCSA website. But it's saying the crash indicator is not on there. I promise you, I see it on there. It shows how many crashes they've had, how many fatalities had. I've looked at it, but the hazardous material compliance, I've not really noticed nothing on there, but I'm normally not looking for that. Now, they're only visible to the motor carriers themselves and enforcement personnel. I don't think that's true neither, because I can go in there and look under SaferWeb, pull up that MC, whatever state they're out of, and find that carrier, and it's listed right below there. Now, obviously, why does this even matter? Now, carriers with poor CSAs obviously struggle to get loads. So that's what we're talking about as being a freight dispatcher, looking at an MC and looking at their CSA and how they are obviously, targeted for audits and face higher insurance rates. So that hurts them. But on the other end, when brokers are looking at it, they're looking at that as well. So what it does, it actually increases the difficulty for getting loads with basically either shippers, if they're doing direct shippers, or brokers, because many shippers and freight brokers use CSA scores as a really truly as a critical factor in their carrier selection process. So a carrier will obviously with a high poor, because remember the higher 0 to 100, the higher it is, then obviously the poorer the score is. So they're looking at carriers that actually lower. But with those high scores, they obviously can be bypassed for more desirable loads, removed from preferred carrier list, have their rates cut due to perceived risk, even though it may or may not be a perceived risk, because they're only running off the numbers. Word of mouth is about useless these days. So many people lie, it ain't even funny. And also lose business, retire entirely to the safer competitors, because they want to make sure their freight gets from point A to point B without being scattered all over the interstate, especially for hazmat. Now, this directly impacts the carrier's revenue and profitability and your ability to actually function effectively as a freight dispatcher. So that's the reason I try to tell everyone, if they got a bad CSA, you got to make some decisions. Me, myself, I don't feel like going through that long drawn out process. of waiting for their CSA to get better. I just tell them, look, when your CSA gets better, I can be a more effective dispatcher. You want me to make miracle out of mud, and it's not really something I'm able to do in my own capabilities. And I know my limitations because my limitations are based off what I know goes on inside the logistics community. Now, obviously, you're also going to deal with a lot of problems with this. You'll have increased scrutiny and audits by the FMCSA DOT. So high CSA scores flag a carrier for increased attention by FMCSA, which obviously turns into DOT, and they're more likely to receive warning letters, and that just compounds the problem. Now that they become a higher priority in the roadside inspections because I told you they can read your numbers on the side of your truck. The computer does it without any effort, which obviously leads to more violations and if problems still persist, in which obviously it just becomes an accumulative issue on the overall CSA. Now, they also are more prone to the DOT audits. That's compliance reviews, which can be time consuming, disruptive, and can lead to fines again, out of service or out of services right there at the DOT station, and even the revoking of their own operating authority if they become so severe for the non-compliance, if they don't make corrective actions. And they actually have to have a corrective action, a plan that they set into the DOT. And then they have to follow through because they give them a certain amount of time, but they will strip them of that authority if they're not in compliance. Now, the big problem, yeah, you don't want to lose your authority, but the high insurance rates, the insurance are going to tear you up when they're actually looking at those CSA scores to assess the carrier's risk profile. Now, poor CSA scores obviously indicate a higher likelihood of accidents, claims, and overall risk, which they actually take serious. And it also directly translates to significantly higher insurance premiums, making it more expensive for the carrier to operate. In extreme carrier, the carrier might even struggle to find insurance cover just altogether. And I've got people out there right now that I deal with that they're looking at $31,000, and they'll tell me, well, can you find me better insurance? I need to know why you got a $31,000 premium. Okay, 7,000 down, $2,000 a month. That's crazy. Okay. Also, it's a big impact on the driver hiring and retention because when I'm going with a carrier, I'm looking, I don't even need to know their CSA score, which I'm going to ask. I literally ask them, well, how good's your MC? The famous line is, oh, it's pretty good. We don't really have a problem getting freight. We can basically get everything off any load board. Okay, you need to prove that to me. So a poor CSA score can also make it difficult to attract and retain qualified drivers because they know this. And as the drivers prefer to work for safer and not really more safer because ain't no safety out there. I mean, it's a dangerous place out there. But more reputable companies can secure quality freight from basically any low board, so you're not sitting and being rejected and rejected and rejected and saying, well, we can't use you because you're on some kind of hold or whatever it is where they won't use you. So the CSA scores are a crucial safety report for all trucking companies. Maintaining that low safety score is paramount to a carrier. I mean, it's paramount as far as their operational efficiency, their financial health, their reputation, and overall ability to do business in the higher regulated freight industry. We're talking about high-end loads, high dollar loads, high risk. Well, I didn't say high risk, but like hazardous materials, stuff like that. So when you're looking at that carrier, make sure you don't take this lightly when you do it because otherwise you're digging your hole. A lot of people, oh, CSA school, la la la. But I'm telling you, it's that important. So don't drag it out. I would definitely look up them. You can look them up on the report, but you need to actually ask them, what is your CSA score? Because on Safer Web, I haven't never really seen the CSA score. I've looked for it. I know it goes between 1 and 100, but I think it's the carrier. That's confidential information from what I can tell, but they should tell you what it is. And if you don't, they don't want to disclose it, then don't go with it. And don't tell them, hey, give me a number. I need to see a report to see what you're actually doing because I'm going to be boarding with you. Now, most people that I actually dispatch for, I tell them, look, dude, if I can't get you freight, I'm going to cut you loose. I don't care. Even if you're mid-trip, you still owe me for what you owe me for. But if I can't secure load, TQL's refusing you. CH Robbins can refuse you. We're talking about these are big brokerages. If they're refusing you, how's a small brokerage going to be able to cover you? It's a long process to recover from this. And that's the reason a lot of carriers just skip out on their own MC and they actually buy a new MC. and whatever name it happens to be, they'll just roll under that name. But there's also issues even with that, which we're not going to get into. Um, but like people say, I'll go buy me an MC, be ready to go. It don't really work quite like that, because like if you're a big carrier and you think, well, yeah, I can just take my MC, swap it out. Look, every broker is going to know. I mean, how they know, I can't give you that answer, but I just know I've seen it done with bigger carriers, and I've seen it become a real bad problem. They tried to change their name with it and kind of keep it the same, but at the same time change that MC, and it don't work out like that. So, because remember, I'm not in the safety department. I don't know all the bells and whistles. I know what the CSA score is for and how it affects you as a freight dispatcher. And this should obviously help you out so you can make better choices when you're actually dealing with owner operators. So make sure, even though this ain't in the overall spectrum of being a freight dispatcher, but this is something I feel that you really should know. And a lot of people don't cover this. So make sure you look at that CSA score. Make sure it's a low CSA score, that you're going to be able to secure freight. But also look at the time they've had that authority too. That's very critical. Yeah, there's brokerages out there that will do new MCs, but that's the reason I tell even the freight dispatchers, don't get an MC. You can see in the relation to getting MC and the drivers that are not really, it's not your equipment, it's not your employees. These are independent, uh, you know, owner operators, that they can destroy your MC and not give a crap about how it affects you. They're not that deep indebted to you in no form or fashion. So that's the reason I tell you, just steer away from the MC. Get owner operators that have their own MC. Make sure their MC is actually in good standing. That CSA is not going to be rejected by the brokers, and that way you can secure freight and keep that truck moving. But anyways, I'll bring this to end. That's about long enough to discussing this. If you have any questions or concerns or any comments, please put them down below. Obviously, contact information is down below. And, I like to also always throw out a congratulations to everybody that's pushing through the course, getting out there, getting your owner operators and getting moving. It's a great deal. I'm glad that, we've got good owner operators we're able to resource to you. That's been a pretty good deal. But like I tell people, if you don't know how to recruit once you get done with your course, please get a hold of us, because we've actually had owner operators that we knew were qualified, and it just, I don't know, we don't know. I mean, did you not approach them right, or whatever the scenario is? And we want to make sure we clean that up. So remember, the more you engage me, the more I can actually give you the information that makes you successful in this. It's not magic. People do it every day. There's people that run around billionaires that are not geniuses. I must be a real ding dong, because I haven't even made nothing close to that. But that's not saying that you couldn't be successful where I'm not. But I hope this information makes you more proficient in understanding the CSA, and we'll kind of leave it at that. And thank you for visiting Truck Driver Nation, watching our content. Please like or subscribe. It definitely helps us out. How it does, I don't know, but I like knowing that people are viewing the content and it's actually doing some good for them. But thank you so much. Everybody be blessed. Drivers out there on the road, be safe. And we'll just leave it to that. Have a good one. Talk to you at the next presentation.